Hello everyone, we are less than 2 weeks away from the conclusion of the Maze Runner series, and like you guys, I'm very excited to dive back into this novel trilogy turned movie franchise and see where the next chapter leads us. But beforehand, we're going to need to refresh on a few things, and given that the Maze Runner is fairly important to the plot of the Scorch Trials, I felt it very important to quickly graze over the first film in this video. Hi, I'm MD from Observe Media, and when I say quickly, I mean here we go. A kid named Thomas wakes up with absolutely no memories in a place called the Glade. The Glade is connected to a maze. Thomas is naturally drawn to the maze, but the Glade's leader, Albie, says no one but the runners are allowed to get into the maze. A runner is basically a guy who spends all day running around the maze trying to map it out because it's ever changing. Thomas meets a few people: Albie, the leader; Newt, the second leader; Mino, a runner; and Gally, a guy; and Chuck, before Thomas, the most recent kid to come to the Glade. Thomas spends a few days trying to figure out how the Glade works, and when he's attacked by another runner who gets stung by what is known as a griever. They're nasty, you should avoid them. The Glade then lets another person up named Teresa. Thomas has an epiphany that maybe the maze isn't moving around for funsies, and maybe that their movements are actually a code. Teresa wakes up and tells Thomas that they know each other. Grievers attack the camp and kill a bunch of people, including Albie. Thomas gets stung in an attempt to regain his memory, and he does, finding out it's an escape. A large group of them think it's best to escape. Gally betrays them, kills Chuck, and it's a very sad moment. As Chuck dies, he gives Tom a pendant that his sister gave him. After this, Teresa and Thomas discover that they work for an organization named Wicked. Great name, by the way. They set up the whole Glade, but they're not sure why. The boys and Teresa and then get rescued by some kind of rebel group, then brought to a safe haven while being told about the flare virus, an apocalyptic occurrence that kills off half of the world's population. Alright, well, that was a very brief synopsis of the Maze Runner. If you would like a more play-by-play analysis, comment down in the video and let us know. Otherwise, let's get started on the Maze Runner, the Scorch Trials. Now, we start the film in a small flashback as Thomas, a small boy, being taken from his mother by soldiers. He then wakes up inside a helicopter with some soldiers engrossed in battle around them. Thomas grabs Chuck's pendant, and the survivors from the last film are escorted into a large rebel base. This is where they meet Mr. Jansen. He basically explains that they are special because they are immune to the flare virus. A virus that turns out most people, into flesh-eating violent monsters called cranks. The Gladers are given showers, food, vitamins, or asked several questions regarding what they remembered about Wicked. Back in the cafeteria, Thomas learns that they aren't the only maze. Amongst a room of around 100 teenagers, Jansen once a day comes out and takes a few to the promised land. In the middle of the night, Eris, one of the fellow rescued mazers, leaves Thomas through the vents, where he shows Thomas that people are being carted into a special off-limits room. They both theorize that no one actually leaves the base and that something weird is going on. The next day, Thomas snags the key from one of the guards, and with Eris makes his way into the lab where he finds that it's some sort of farm to make a cure. We also find out that this is not a rebel base, but instead it's a Wicked base. Jansen speaks with the leader of the Wicked, Dr. Page, on a video call, and she tells Jansen that he needs to hurry up with the harvesting. Jansen agrees, and then Thomas and Eris rush back to the room where they start making their escape through the vents. Eris separates from the group. Thomas makes his way to the lab where he rescues Teresa. Now, Jansen warns them that they won't be able to make it out in the Scorch, which is, outside, basically. The group make their way to the exit where Eris reappears and helps them escape. Quickly outside, where while scavenging, discover a power source. This wakes up a bunch of cranks that start to chase them, and in the chase, Winston gets injured. The next morning, they make their way to the remnants of a destroyed San Francisco. Outside of that, everything is covered in desert. Winston collapses, and the gang carry him as far as they can to make their way to the mountains. Teresa mentions that they should go back, and before Thomas can figure out what she's hiding, Winston revealed that he is in fact infected, despite, thinking that they were immune by the flare virus, and is turning into one of the cranks. Newt grabs the gun they found earlier and lets Winston end his own misery. At night, Thomas wakes up and notices lights in the distance. A tropical storm begins to stir behind them, and they make a run towards the lights. Mino gets struck by lightning and they drag him inside the abandoned warehouse. Don't worry, he's fine. Inside the warehouse, they meet Jorge, the leader of the small Outpost group who deducts that they came from a Wicked base, and that makes them very valuable. Thomas and Jorge work out a deal to help them get to the Red Arm, the name of a rebel group in the mountains. As Jorge and the girl are about to make their way out, Jansen and Wicked shows up and tries to corner them. Using a musical distraction, and by musical I mean giant explosion, Jorge leads the Gladers out as Thomas and Brenda get separated and have to make their ways through the sewers where they encounter mutated cranks. Narrowly making their escape, they make their way to a large grouping of people as they look for someone named Marcus. Well, they found him. He's very eccentric, and he tells them that their friends might be inside, but before they can enter, they must drink a green hallucinogenic liquid. This sends Thomas and Brenda into a massive trip, whoa, man, which eventually leads them to falling down unconscious. We're then thrown into a psychedelic dream sequence that happens to be a memory. Thomas meets up with Teresa in the memory. Thomas is being chased, and right before he's caught, he tells Teresa that he had to do it and that she has to understand why he did it. He's suddenly jerked awake by Teresa in the real world, and then Jorge and all the others are there as Jorge interrogates Marcus. Jorge gets the location of where he believes the Red Arm might be. After convening a truck, they make their way into the mountain, eventually getting captured by the Red Arm. Before things get too rough, Harriet and Tanya recognize Eris. They reveal that they were in the maze together, and then the girls escort the group to Outpost of the Red Arm. Before everyone can be introduced, Brenda collapses and causes a ruckus amongst the outposts. Suddenly, the leader of the Red Arm, Mary, appears and settles the commotion. She reveals that Thomas was the Red Arm's source and that he supplied them with every known maze whereabouts. Alright, later on in the tent, Mary creates an antidote from Thomas's blood and gives it to Brenda, saying that it cannot be manufactured, but instead harvested, and that it's not permanent and she will always need more antidote. Bummer. After Mary leaves, Brenda wakes up, and it is at this moment that we learn that Brenda is Chuck's sister, and a very deep moment ensues. Thomas meets up with Teresa shortly after this. Teresa tells Thomas a story of how her mother got sick and eventually clawed her own eyes out. Teresa reveals that she wants Thomas to understand why she did it. In the distance, we can see approaching helicopters. The choppers bomb the outpost, and Jansen and his SWAT teams round up everybody at the outpost. Thomas appears to let himself be captured and joins his friends amongst the captured. Suddenly, Dr. Page appears from another aircraft. It's at this moment that everyone discovers that Teresa betrayed them all. Dr. Page and Mary have a small argument when Jansen murders Mary in cold blood. Before the Gladers are rounded up, Thomas pulls out an explosive and threatens to take them down. His friends join him right away before he detonates the bomb. Jorge appears with a truck and destroys the helicopter, causing a huge diversion. Pandemic breaks out and Jansen gets shot, Mino gets captured, and the SWAT team escort Dr. Page, Jansen, and as many Gladers as they can out of the outpost. When the morning breaks, we see the camp is utterly destroyed, and so is its morale. Thomas stands up and tells the group that he's going to rescue Mino, kill Ava Page, and stop Wicked. The outpost all stand with him and ask him, "What's your plan?" Thomas lets out a small smile, and we cut to black. And there you go, guys. Hope that helped you guys out a lot going into The Maze Runner: The Death Cure, coming out in the theaters January 26th of this year. I know it helped me out a lot, and I'm so ready for this conclusion. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe to our channel for weekly videos. And this Friday, we have our top 10 anticipated movies coming out as well, so check that out. If there are any movies that you would love a rundown of, upcoming sequel or not, leave us a comment down below. But until then, we'll catch you guys later.